Hello and welcome back to Lorcana Villain. My name is Baker, and today I've got the top 8 deck lists for you from a 219 player event in the United States organised by Charie's Collectables Show. This took place on the 14th of December. We've covered these events in the past. Charie's Collectables Show have been running competitive Lorcana events for quite some time now and often get a large player pool and some very high skill tier of players as well. And my understanding was that this started off as an 8k in prizes event, but due to the attendance it was raised to a 10k, which is really awesome to see. I say I've got the top 8 deck list. That's kind of a little bit of a lie. Because it's such a big event, I would have covered the top 16 deck lists, but my information comes from inkdex.com, and unfortunately at time of recording there are only 7 of the top 8 deck lists available and 1 of the top 16. So I still technically have 8 of the deck lists from the top 16 of the event, but yeah, unfortunately there are a few missing, but I didn't want to leave it any longer before doing this video. I really need to get back into some semblance of a routine. But as a special treat to spice up the episode when we finish looking at the deck lists, we are going to be having a chat with the champion of this event, back-to-back champion of the CCS events, the legendary DeCandio, who has agreed to jump into a call with me and have a chat for 15-20 minutes. So I'm super looking forward to that, and hopefully you guys do as well. But I want to jump into some deck lists. A quick shout out to the channel sponsor, Cardmarket. If you're looking for Lorcana singles at competitive rates, then check out Cardmarket. But let's take a look at some deck lists. So in first place, as I said, we have DeCandio. No stranger to Lorcana success. As I mentioned, back-to-back winner of the Charlie Collectables Show's events at this point. And yeah, has just had a ton of success in Lorcana, definitely respected as one of the best players in the game. And they're rocking some Steel Amber Mine, the first of 4 Steel Amber decks to look at in this video. But yeah, this is the super low to the ground aggressive Mine variant that I know DeCandio has been a fan of throughout the majority of set 6, at least in public tournaments that I know that he's been sharing on socials. May have played some other stuff at locals and stuff like that, but yeah, DeCandio seems to be really enjoying this deck. And like I said, we're going to end the video by having a chat with DeCandio about this list and about his run. So for that reason, I'm not going to spend too long on it. But yeah, we are not the classical Whole New World variant. We're not playing Whole New World. We're not even playing Aerial. We are playing a couple of songs for Let the Storm Rage On and for Strength of a Raging Fire. Strength is, of course, inkable, and if things go well, you have a nice wide board. So this can get to some nice big numbers. And Let the Storm Rage On, that 2 ping damage can often be significant. And we are running 4 copies of Cinderella Ballroom Sensation as a way to sing these songs on the cheap. So that's super good. But yeah, one of the main themes of this deck is indeed that 7 Dwarves Mine, which is a 2-cost inkable, 2 to move there, 6 willpower, 1 passive lore, and during your turn, the first time you move a character to the mine, you can do 1 damage to a chosen character. But if it's a knight that you move to the 7 Dwarves Mine, you do 2 damage instead, and that ping damage can be super significant. We're playing a couple of knights. We've got 3 copies of the 1-drop Happy, who is a 2/1 quest for 1 and during your turn has evasive, and 4 copies of that Doc, who's a 2-cost uninkable 1/3 quest for 1, and when you play him, you can discard your hand to draw 2 cards. Even if he's the last card in your hand, you can go Doc, I've got nothing left, draw up 2. So Doc is inherently good in this type of deck anyway, with tons of low-to-the-ground characters. We want to play out our hand as much as possible and then refresh with Doc. But of course, being a mine, that synergy with the location is great. And Happy is a super good 1-drop. It's a way to answer evasives like Diablo. If it's not a Cove, then Happy is enough to deal with it. And even if the Diablo is at Cove, then it's just a matter of a Happy and a Storm, or a Happy and a move to Mine. Or to be honest, just a Diablo at Cove, hitting 3. You can probably expect to do that a good amount of the time with Strength of a Raging Fire. But even for the higher will-powered evasives like the Genie, who is currently running rampant on the meta in my opinion, obviously Happy alone isn't enough, but move if you've got a dry Happy on board, play the mine, move Happy to the mine, do 2 damage to the Genie, assuming it's exerted, then challenge it, and that's a pretty efficient trade. So yeah, Happy really filling a great role in this deck in my opinion. We've got 4 copies of Daisy Duck for that straight gas, 4 copies of Lilo, who you can return to your board at the beginning of your turn before you draw. If you've drawn a card for turn, then you've missed this trigger. You have to decide before then, but you can pay 2 to bring her in exerted, which if your opponent's got characters on board, then it's not always the best, but at least it's distracting them a little bit. They're having to re-challenge you and not be questing themselves. But against the red decks, Be Prepared, Sisu, stuff like that, then being able to just put this back on the board and keep redeveloping that pressure is super good. We've got 3 copies of Piglet, questing for 3, nice and aggressive. 4 copies of Calhoun, 2 cost uninkable, 3/2, quest for 1, resist, and when she banishes a character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. She does a great job of just freezing the board, making your opponent think twice about turning sideways, and that 3 strength is also pretty good for opposing Flynn Rider frenemies, so that you can make sure that you have a fairly bulky body on board. We've got 4 copies of Smee for those incredible stats, Lawrence for the stats, 4 Pete to shut down those actions, take away. Be Prepared is a big one to just be able to shut off and say, sorry, no, that is not your out. But even shutting off things like Storm, Strength, opposing Whole New World, Zeus's, tons of stuff, Pete just says no. For Rapunzel, obviously, one of our best ways of drawing cards outside of Doc. 2 copies of Pluto, who is just so cheap for what is essentially a 5/5 bodyguard. Really great stat line, trades with Maui. Fox doesn't even take Pluto out, so just that double purpose of being something that can break a board if you need to, but also just being an efficient bodyguard to protect our more aggressive questers. And 4 copies of Kida, filling her sort of original role when she first came out, which was just to have a nice wide board, put down the Kida, lower the strength of everything on your opponent's board, and hopefully you just get a free questing turn out of her. Obviously, these days you would also see her alongside sort of Under the Sea decks. But yeah, in this deck, it's just to sort of shut down the strength on opposing characters and give you safe questing turns. And we've looked at the actions and songs, so yeah, it looks super, super good. And I'm going to move on because we're going to pick DeCandio's brain about this in a bit more detail later on, but a huge congratulations to him on first place. We'll go straight on and look at all of the Steel Amber decks. In top 4, we have Ruben with another less conventional version of Steel Amber. This one utilising the big bad Mufasa. When banished, you get to look at the top card of your deck. If it's a character, you can play it for free and just play Exerted. We are playing some non-character cards here. We've got the 3 Zeus, 4 Strength, and 4 Storm, which I think is pretty reasonable. Again, you will be keeping track of how many songs you have in your hand, how many you've gone through. Like, there's often going to be that risk that Mufasa's going to hit a song, but more often than not, you should be hitting characters, to be fair. And again, he's not like the main theme of this deck. We're just super aggro in the first place. We've got Daisy Ducks here. We've got Calhouns who can check the board and gain lore. We are playing 2 copies of Doc, so we're another deck that can hopefully just play out our hand and you regain resources with Doc. We're also playing 3 copies of the Leader of the 7 Dwarves Doc, who on quest you can lower the cost of the next character you play by 1. This can enable a turn 4 5-drop, such as the Mufasa, the Chenpo, or the big bad bulky Gantu. We've got Lawrence for stats, Pete to shut down those actions, Rapunzel for some more draw, 3 copies of that good boy Guard Doc Pluto, and then yeah, I've mentioned the 5 cost characters, but also running 3 copies of the Cinderella Style Hearted, which is great. Obviously we have it as a shift option onto the Ballroom Sensation, and if we hit this off of Mufasa, that's pretty good. And yeah, we saw SteelFasa do quite well. I don't know if it was Seattle or Vegas, one or the other, but a deck that I think made top 8 or top 16. And yeah, it's one that crops up every now and then, and made top 4 at a very impressive over 200 person field here. So huge congratulations to Ruben. Into top 8, we've got Brian with a much more classical version of SteelSong, playing those 4 copies of Ariel to find songs, hopefully, and sing them on the cheap with that Singer 5. In that vein, we've got the 4 copies of Whole New World to refresh our hand. Just play out as much as you can, make a nice aggressive board, refresh with Whole New World so that you've got a way to reassemble a board if your opponent breaks it. We've got Pete's to hopefully assure that our boards aren't broken as easily. You'll love to see it. We've got all the standard songs for removal, including 4 copies of the Big Bad, and then along came Zeus, 1 copy of that Bare Necessities to snipe away those non-character cards, and 1 copy of that World's Greenest Criminal Mind, who has a lot of quite reasonable targets. The Tamatoa, the Maleficent, and Maui are super old ones. The big Sisu, and of course the big bad Maui Half Shark is a prime target for this, so you'll love to see it. For our characters, the 4 copies of Ballroom Sensation Cinderella to sing our songs. We are running 1 copy of the Floodborn Stout Hearted, 3 copies of that aggressive Daisy Duck. We are running a 4/4 Queen line, which is not so common these days. Another way that we can sing Whole New World on the cheap, and as soon as turn 2 if we want to. And she's a nice way of, again, controlling the board. board. When she quests, one character's strength goes down by 4, another one goes up by 4. So suddenly your Cinderella, your Ursula, any of these low strength characters, even things like Rapunzel, are now hitting for a whole lot more, and hopefully now not trading with whatever they're challenging into. So nice addition. We've got 4 copies of that Ursula Vanessa to sing all the 4 or less cost songs on the cheap. We've got some nice stat cards, Mr. Smee, 3 Lawrence, those 4 Pete, and we're running 3 copies of that Prince Naveen, a nice emergency way to sing a whole new world if we really need to. Say our Ariel gets brawled, say our 1-drop queen gets fire the cannons, whatever it is. If we can't set up a nice easy way to sing a whole new world but we really need to, Prince Naveen can be a panic button for that, or just for singing Along Came Zeus or any of our songs, and then he's still just sitting there with a sing a 6 keyword and questing for 2, which is pretty good. So yeah, a much more classical version of SteelSong. Nice to see this version also doing well. Congratulations to Brian. And our last SteelSong deck, we've got Robert in top 8, another more classical version, all those same songs that I just mentioned, no bare necessities, instead 2 copies of the World's Greatest Criminal Mind, 1 less Zeus, but we're running 1 copy of Grab Your Swords, which can certainly help against those aggro decks, a lot of the Emerald decks. That's going to help you boost up your numbers. No Tinkerbells in here though. 1 copy of the Stout-Hearted Cinderella. Instead of the Queen line, we are running the Robin Hood shift line, 4 copies of the 1-drop, 4 copies of the Champion of Sherwood, who's just shift 3. When he banishes a character, you can gain 2 lore, and when he is banished in a challenge, you can draw a card. Robin Hood, a bit of an old reliable for classical SteelSong. More interestingly, we're seeing 2 copies of the Ariel Sonic Warrior, 6 cost inkable, 3/8 quest for 2. She's a shift 4, and we're of course running 4 copies of our Spectacular Singer. And whenever you play a song, you can pay 2 ink to deal 3 damage to a chosen character. So if you've got the ink, then suddenly now you can sing Zeus and then do an extra. You could do 7 with Along Came Zeus. You could do 5 with Storm. Strength for a Raging Fire, obviously dependent on how big your board is, but yeah, just this extra ping damage can be pretty cool. And outside of obviously red decks like Medusa loves to prey on this Ariel, but outside of that, Ariel was really tough to remove with that 8 willpower, so I think it's a perfectly fine addition. 1 copy of that Lilo Escape Artist, only 2 copies of that Aggressive Daisy Duck, and then we're playing 1 copy of the Baloo, who has a 3 cost uninkable, 0/3 quest for 1 bodyguard, but when he's banished, gain 2 lore. So more often than not, he's always going to represent that 2 lore, unless your opponent wins the turn after you put this down. So yeah, another nice addition, and it can let us be a little more reckless with our other characters on the quest if we know that Baloo can bodyguard them. So yeah, another nice looking version. A great success rate for SteelSong overall, and I congratulate Robert. Going back now to second place, we have our one and only Ruby Sapphire list, piloted by Jeremiah. So a great run. Again, this was a huge field. But yeah, only 1 Ruby Sapphire making it to top 8 is super interesting. We are a Maui half shark variant, 6 cost inkable, 7/5 quest for 1. Evasive. We have Chee-hoo! Whenever this character challenges another character, you may return an action card from your discard to your hand. And Wayfinding, whenever you play an action, gain 1 lore. So we've got lots of actions that we would be playing anyway. Sail the Azurite Sea, great for card draw and ramp. 3 Vision of the Future. I do think 3 Vision is low personally, but a great action, great for finding those key pieces. Only 3 copies of Brawl I think is a pretty good. I'm considering this in my Ruby Amethyst, to be honest, at the moment, because I want space and I feel like it might be the Brawl. 3 copies of How Far Go is obviously an incredible card, letting you filter through, find key pieces and continue ramping. 1 copy of Let It Go, plenty of good targets for this. You won't necessarily always have the Maleficent Dragon online yet. You don't always want to play that 1 copy of Be Prepared, so this is a nice removal tool for things that have got to go, like Tamatoas and opposing Maui Half Shark. And of course, all of these actions, if they're in our discard, then there's always the potential to get them back with that Maui Half Shark. 2 copies of Shield of Virtue, where you can exert and pay 3 to ready a chosen character, so keep characters safe. Or even just get extra challenges out of them. If you've got this Maui Half Shark down and his ink is dry, or he's got Rush from the Vitalosphere, and there are a couple of targets, then you could get some pretty good value off of this. And of course, it is just inherently a 1-drop item. 1 copy of that Vitalosphere to give Rush and an extra 2 strength. And we are an Ice Block variant, 4 Ice Block, no Medusas in here whatsoever, and only the 3 Brawl, but of course 3 copies of the Daring Visitor Sisu, and 4 copies of that big, bad, empowered sibling, Slay Queen. 4 Porpsicle, well. One Lucky Dime becoming the norm, and the one Great Stone Dragon. Again, no Fishbone Quills, which since European Championships really is when we've really started to seeing a lot of the majority of the red-blue decks just cutting this quill entirely and just saying, no, T-Po, sail the Azurite Sea, how far I'll go, and maybe a Great Stone Dragon trigger or two is enough. That's all I need. And yeah, going all the way to second place. Yeah, I really like a lot of these counts. I'd like the 4th Vision. 2 copies of Hideaway. I think 1 is probably fine, especially because locations are like not popular at the moment. Yeah, that would probably be my one and only change, although I have every belief that Jeremiah is a far more accomplished and experienced Red Blue player than me, but I'm always going to give my 2 cents, and yeah, that will probably be the only thing that I would change. But other than that, it looks like a super good list. I'd probably want the second B prep, but that's biased. Nonetheless, a huge congratulations to Jeremiah. Going into top 4, another player who is no stranger to Lorcana success, we have Kendall. It was Kendall versus DeCandio was one of the top 4 games, and this whole event was streamed. I'll put a link down below to the 20 Lore Pro Twitch channel where you can go back and watch this event. And yeah, the top 4 game they showed was super good, but oh mate, I would have loved to have seen the DeCandio Kendall match. Maybe we can ask DeCandio about that at the end. But yeah, Kendall, we've had on the channel before, recognised throughout the Lorcana community as one of the best Ruby Amethyst players in the world, and has a little bit of spice up in here. First of all, they have gone to the 8-1 drops. I know they were on the 4 Sherna 2 Broom for a while, and I've seen them be punished by this a couple of times in the LC3, the Cross Continental Challenge. So nice to see that we are back on those 8, and yeah, it makes sense with more EA tempo in format. You want that turn response to a Merfolk all of the time. A lot of traditional stuff going on here. We are playing 4 copies of Flynn Rider. We've got Sisu and 1 copy of that Empowered Sibling. Bounce package is largely traditional with the 4 Snake, 4 Goat, 4 Fox, but only 3 copies of Merlin Rabbit, which I think is going to be the more often than not standard going forward. It's where I'm at. Only 3 copies of the Genie. Personally, I'm on 4 for this, but full respect to Kendall. He knows this deck really well. I'll be super interested to see if it remains the count for Kendall as the format continues, or if they do choose to go up to that 4th. So it's certainly something I'll be keeping an eye on. Running 4 copies of Elsa, that's super important in the Genie Wars, and good against the Emerald decks, and just a really solid card overall. And playing that 1 copy of Bell Accomplished Mystic, which I've been super enjoying in the European Championships before even round 1. My prediction, along with just saying that Ruby Amethyst would win, no surprises there, that I would predict that. But yeah, I said from day 1, this is going to be super impactful. Not from day 1, from before round 1 of that event. I was like, I think Bell Accomplished Mystic is going to be a really important piece of the story of Lorcana European Championships, and that absolutely was the case, included in the best of 5 finals. And yeah, Kendall playing just 1 copy, which I'm on 2, but I'm coming around to the idea that 1 might just be fine. Great card on the draw against those Genies. 3 copies of Maui, I think is right. We're on a 2-1 split of Ladies, 2 copies of Medusa, 4 Brawl, 4 Friends, 4 B Prep, and then a couple of spicy additions. 1 copy of Dragon's Fire, which I really like. Again, you don't always want to play the B Prep, especially if you've got an established board yourself. Also, the fact that Dragonfire isn't sniped away by Ursula is pretty big. So this is great for that solo Tamatoa, that solo Sisu, that solo Maui Shark, and plenty of other things. So yeah, I really like this one off Dragonfire. And the 1 copy of Maui's Fishhook, 3 cost Inkable item. If you have a character named Maui in play, then you don't have to pay to use the Shapeshift ability. You still have to exert, but you don't have to pay ink. And the Shapeshift ability is exert and pay 2 unless you've got a Maui. And then you get to choose to either give evasive to one of your characters until the start of your next turn, or you can give +3 strength, which the extra strength could be really nice, like take out some bigger bodies with some of your more lower to the ground characters, or locations, even though they're less popular at the moment, but they do still pop up. But giving evasive to a character that can now take out the opposing Genie, I think this is why, this is how we warrant just probably 3 copies of the Genie, because we're playing Maui's Fishhook, which in itself can be part of that Genie battle. You don't even need your own Genie anymore. You can just have an established Sisu, as long as the opponent has enough cards in their hand, the Goat, the Fox. Yeah, I like the inclusion of the Maui's Fishhook for sure. And it's another thing I'll be interested to see if that is kept up by Kendall as they continue through set 6 format and beyond. But yeah, incredible player. And yeah, anytime Kendall makes some changes to their Ruby Amethyst list, you definitely want to pay attention and see what those changes are and why those are happening and whether you agree with them or not. The Dragonfire, I'm very, very sold on. I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on the Maui's Fishhook. I get the reasoning, and I may end up changing my mind. I would probably just be more inclined to have the 4 Genie, but I absolutely love the Dragonfire, and yeah, the Maui's Fishhook, you can see why it's been added and why it probably performed well. So maybe I'll change my mind on that too, but nonetheless, a huge congratulations to Kendall. And our final list for top 8, although I am going to show the one top 16 list that was available, we have Tristex 90 with some Amethyst Steel. Mostly very low to the ground. We've got those 4 Maleficent Biding at Times, those 4 Brooms, 4 Diablos, and 4 Chernabog's Followers, running just 2 copies of Merlin Crab to boost up these characters and make them hit all the harder, working really well with Diablo specifically. 2 copies of that Calhoun, again, a great board checker, and the potential 2 lore gain could be really nice. We are running 3 copies of Doc. We expect to be playing out our hand as often as possible, and we want to refuel. Smee for the stats, but of course running Foxes. No rabbits in here whatsoever, instead just 4 copies of the Genie. We are all gas all of the time. 4 White Rose for that lore gain. Goats here, obviously. 2 Pete to shut down actions. 2 Elsa, which can help you in the Genie Wars and just help you with opposing aggro characters. 3 copies of the Big Bag Gandalf. I feel like Spessy built this deck. I don't know why I'm thinking of Spessy as I look at this. And 1 copy of Yzma, who I do really like. I think she's not as good as I was predicting her to be in reveal season. Because my first Ruby Amethyst list of the season, I was rocking one of these. But that's when discard was a lot more prominent. Maybe it was wrong regardless, but that soon changed. But yeah, in these super loads of the ground decks, hey, why not? She's inkable at the end of the day. You can exert, and if you have fewer than 3 cards in your hand, draw up to 3, and questing for 2 is pretty nice. 4 cannons and 2 Befuddle I think is super good, and 3 copies of the Queen's Castle. I much prefer these Queen's Castles in loads of the ground Amethyst Steel decks compared to the Library. Library's fine, it's alright. I will always understand, but I think Queen's Castle, the clock and the high roll for it is super, super good. So yeah, looks like a really nice list. Congratulations to them. And our final list to look at, the only one that was submitted for top 16, we have Gerald with some EA Tempo, just win the game. Repopularized very much so by Artabax and Lorcana Decklists, and the second place finish of the European Championships. I still haven't had confirmation if it was Michele or Michaela, but nonetheless the second place finish at European Championships. So yeah, this deck very much back on people's radars. Really aggressive 1-drops. Only 12 1-drops does seem low for an EA Tempo deck. I don't know if it's wrong. I think I'm just conditioned to like see more, but this is likely enough. The 4 Merfolk, the 4 Diablo, and the 4 Shadowbog's Followers. 4 copies of Merlin Crab to complement these Diablos and to complement things like the Ursula 2-drop and the Kit Cloud Kicker. So yeah, I really like the high counter Crab. 4 copies of Bonsai, which is going to be worse into the steel decks, but much better into the red decks overall. 4 copies of Go-Go Tamago. On play, you can pay an extra 2 and gain lore equal to the damage on a chosen opposing character. So your opponent's big bulky bodies with a few damage on them are not as safe in this if you're running Go-Go's, Maui's, Elsa's 5th Spirits, just anything big and bulky, Tamatoas, anything the big and bulky that might sit on the board is a huge liability, and Go-Go can and will win games. Of course, Ursula to snipe those songs, and we are running 1 copy of the Floodborn Ursula, which can shut down songs, exert opposing characters, or even just the surprise of Shift Quest, that extra 2 lore not all players are going to see coming. 2 Roses, 4 copies of Kit Cloud Kicker to control the board, 4 Genies. We are running 2 Rabbits, so a little bit of a resource reclamation. That's not a word. A way to gain resources, which is really what Rabbit is more so than Genie. Of course, the Goats, 2 copies of Belle, 4 Elsa, so we are well equipped for those Genie Wars, and 2 Cricky to again give us really nice high challenging turns out of nowhere, and Cricky quests for 3, which is pretty darn hot. So yeah, no surprise to see this do well. A huge congratulations to Gerald. And here we are. Someday someone will best me, but it won't be today, and it won't be you. I am joined by the legendary Brennan DeCandio. First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to take some time to talk to me. I know that between your own content, which we will plug more as we go on, and between your own playtesting and of course your family, your time is very precious. So I'm super grateful that you're willing to sit down and have a chat with me. I had the pleasure of having you on a while back as part of a group podcast, which was a lot of fun, but I'm honoured to get to spend some time one-on-one with you. You're a player that we've talked about a lot on the channel and highlighted highlighted your achievements, and you seem to be having a pretty good season so far. But I want to apologise for something before we start into the Lorcana stuff, which is those people that are regular viewers of my channel and maybe caught the last episode that DeCandio agreed to come on as part of group podcast. I must have spent about 20 minutes completely ignoring his very polite request that we take a bathroom break for about 20 minutes. And I had so many comments along the lines of, poor DeCandio, like, just sat there just trying to get Baker's attention, and he's just yapping on and on. So I didn't notice until I was editing. I was like, oh god, because you were so patient for so long, and then it got to a point you were like, I'm taking a minute, and fair play to you for waiting that long. So thank you.
I'm good now.
I'm glad, but I'm going to be super aware of that as we spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes having a chat. But yeah, just wanted to acknowledge that, because that's the kind of law on my channel now, the time that I didn't let DeCandio have a bathroom break. But nonetheless, it's great to have you here, mate. I want to make it clear from the beginning as well that I don't want to push it in terms of, I know that you have your own content and your own Patreon. I know most of your stuff on Patreon makes its way onto the public platform of YouTube nonetheless. But I want to be super respectful for that and understand that there may be some things you're holding a bit closer to your chest for the sake of those that support your content, which I absolutely support. But I'm hoping that we can get a few crumbs out of you, a few nuggets of knowledge for my villains to take away. And yeah, you've had a pretty good season so far. Just to highlight your overall accomplishment, top 8 at DLC in Chicago, probably feels like quite a while ago now. The winner of the previous Charie Collectables Show's 10K, and that's now a back-to-back, as we'll get on into that. 2-time winner of the pack, and I always mention this, if you're a newer Lorcana player, you may not know the pack, but for those of us that were around from the beginning, these were huge online tournaments, really got like big player pools, often 200-300 plus players, some of the best players, because it was one of the best ways to play the game at the time. So these were online tournaments, but they were not easy by any sense, and it was a 2-day thing, so this is a great accomplishment, and then 2 top 16s. And you, yeah, as I said, we can now add 2-time back-to-back winner of Charie Collectables Show's 10K. Before we get into discussion about your deck and your run, how was the event? Did you enjoy it? Can you talk to us a little bit about Charie Collectables Shows and your experience with them?
Yeah, I've been there twice so far, played in 2 of their events. It's gone pretty well. But no, I went there with the 20 lore guys. They invited me to come up there and stay with them. Really, just amazing group of guys who ran the show and all that. And I helped. I barely helped set up. I think I helped flatten out some of the playmats was my job because I was tired and took a nap. But yeah, we had a really good time. We went out and just a lot of people there, a lot of people from other teams and people I've seen at other DLCs, and just a great venue. Really fun. I got a bunch of gifts for Christmas actually from my daughter and my wife there. Just some fun things to see there. And yeah, no, I love the venue. Charlie's great. I've met him actually for the first time. Amazing guy. Just does what he can to support the players. They increased the prize pool based on attendance. They were originally an 8K up to 10K because, hey, we exceeded the expectation of things. Let's bump it up. And he did the same thing for the second day. So great venue. I'm going to go back every time I can just because.
Yeah, no, like I said, we've been covering them on the channel since it feels like since the beginning of Lorcana. They've been pretty all in on supporting the Lorcana community and running big events. And yeah, as you mentioned, I saw, because I was keeping up with tweets from you and other players that I knew were at the event, as I tend to do because I'm a Lorcana geek. And yeah, I noticed, I think it was yourself that said, based on attendance, I think, did it start as an 8K? Or it started as an 8K? So yeah, just to add that based on attendance, that's fantastic. And those are the sort of like organisers that you absolutely want to support, and I'm really hoping that at some point in my Lorcana career I get to attend one of these events myself, because they always look super fun, and if you're interested in competitive play, it seems like it attracts a lot of the best players. So going into the Lorcana, the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, we'll obviously talk a little bit about your run and get some of your thoughts, highlights of moments you'd like to sort of like bring to attention. But let's talk about your deck a little bit. So the first list that's on the screen at the moment for the audience is not the list that DeCandio played at Charie Collectables Shows, but is the Diggy Hole, which was submitted for the EU versus NA Cross-Continental Challenge, which there have been a couple of changes, not a whole lot, but my understanding is this original deck list was submitted one day after the release of Azurite Sea. I believe that was the time when you had to have it submitted by. So not a lot of time for playtesting, I'm sure. But you've been a fan of this deck from what I've seen of your content, this new aggro style. Obviously, you're well known as a SteelSong player in general. In the past, the more classical versions with Ariel and A Whole New World, that sort of version. But you very much have gravitated to this much lower to the ground aggro version. You were trying it out seemingly since the beginning of the format, and even now that the format is somewhat established, you enter a plus 200 event with near enough the same deck bar a couple of alterations. So for anyone that may be brand new to you and your content and have maybe never heard any of your thoughts on this deck, can you just give us like a summary of what led you to be interested in this style of SteelSong deck at the beginning of the format? What led you to submitting that for the LCCC?
Yeah, so I did a review of the set and kind of went through the cards and where I think they would fit. And I kind of went across a lot of things and noticed there weren't too many things what kind of, in my opinion, fit into traditional SteelSong. And I went to another awesome tournament, Southside Gaming near Miami, the same day I submitted for the LCCC. It was kind of the same deck. I played the deck in that event, and then I just submitted the same day for the Cross Continentals. And yeah, I had a lot of fun kind of figuring that out. But this deck really originated because of the notion that, hey, this deck, a deck I've come to be known for and really do enjoy playing in a lot of ways, didn't really get anything. So I was like kind of thinking in my I used to do game design for a different card game like a while ago.
Nice.
And one of the things we would do is when testing things out and experimenting with different types of ideas, you kind of give yourself restrictions. And one of the things people don't realize is that restriction actually breeds creativity. When you give yourself a specific set of rules to follow and you abide by them, you kind of get creative in that sense. So my rule for this one was like, what do we look like in Amber Steel without playing Ariel in Whole New World? But if I said I could not play those cards and I had to play something else, and I went down several avenues of experimentation with what to make the deck look like in that sense, and that's where the first version was submitted was from. It kind of led me to a more aggressive style, Dwarven Mine plus Dock plus Happy, ways to kind of circumvent some of the Diablo stuff that's going on. People aren't really great into challenging locations except for matchups where you're going to probably ink them anyway. They're inkable, so it's kind of great. But yeah, I want to try out Calhoun, trying to try out Lilo, want to try out Pluto. I mean, these are all cards that are in the new set, and kind of the only cards I really felt like were really in this color pair that really gave this color pair some kind of girth to it. So yeah, that's how it started. And changes wise, I think after the event I played in at Southside Gaming and also at first couple of games into the Cross Continentals, I was looking for a more powerful effect. You kind of get to certain situations where you really need to draw a powerful effect in the game, and nothing really is as sweeping as Kita. It really does have a dramatic impact on the game, and I wanted some cards like that. I had, I think, a list of 19 potential cards to add in a slot of either 1, 3, or 5, because I didn't want more 2s or 4s because I have so many 2s as is, and often my turn 2 is playing a 2-drop, my turn 4 is playing 2 2-drops, so I didn't really want to include things on that curve. So I went and made some changes, cut some cards that were a little clunky and didn't seem necessary. Piglet is fine, it's great, certain matchups. That's why still a few in there, but Lilo often is a little bit better. And Happy was, I felt like there was one too many dwarves. It really needed to be the 7 dwarves in the deck, so I cut one for that purpose.
Star
and
points.
Pluto served a similar function to Kita in defensive action, so I felt the need to shave a couple of those just to have some Kita, because I felt like Kita was actually a better overall inclusion. But yeah, those are the changes I made. I mean, I didn't really change too much. 4 cards for 4 cards, and yeah, it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, no, again, like very, very similar. It's only Kida that's the huge change, and you've already somewhat answered what led to that decision, just wanting more cards off the top that had a more dramatic impact on the game. Cutting down a couple of Plutos, which I'm not that experimented with Pluto, but just from watching games that I've been able to watch through the LCCC and just theory crafting, and I can now playtest online again, hurrah. Pluto's felt super, super good, so I'm wondering why him as the character to cut down to the only 2 copies as opposed to anything else in the deck.
Curve considerations is one of them. Don't want too many high cost cards in the deck with Dock, and really functionality differences. you want only so many cards to play certain roles in your deck, and Pluto's a defensive card,
Yeah.
really, and so is Kita. So putting only so many points in the defensive stance really is what I want to do. So it's a card that kind of made the most sense to me to cut. It could easily be a Calhoun I could see going down to 3 maybe, but really I don't know if it's entirely necessary. Pluto shines really against Ruby Amethyst, I'd say, but not as much against Ruby Sapphire. Honestly, it's just not aggressive enough, and Ruby Amethyst is more of a board control kind of matchup you're fighting, where you're trying to fight for the board literally. And yeah, Pluto's good, but it's not necessary. But it's, again, just the roles that the deck has to fill, and the defensive nature of it. You don't want to have too many slots there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Calhoun was another one I wanted to highlight because I think someone commented on your Twitter thread saying, "Oh, thoughts on Calhoun over the weekend," and I believe your response was, "Flattery don't charge these batteries, civilian," which I suppose says, I know, I loved it, style points for sure. But no, I'd like that kind of like summed up to me your thoughts of this. Like you're putting in 4 copies of an uninkable character. For myself, a lot of players, and I've heard you say yourself, if it's uninkable, like it needs to be that potentially good. So for what, like that would have been what I would have assumed to be like, okay, that's a solid 3. But 4 copies, I was just going to ask you what led you to that, because again, you mentioned the red decks. It is one of your better responses to Flynn, was something I highlighted at the beginning of this video when I just sort of skimmed over your deck. And of course, just the freeze that she can put on the board. So are there any more thoughts about Calhoun? Would you ever consider going down to a lower count, or are you fixed at that 4 for the time being?
I wouldn't say many things are sacred in this deck besides Cinderella, Storm, and Strength. That's kind of all the, as I mentioned, rules to try and break with this deck, to try and experiment with new things. That's one I couldn't really justify violating in any way. So everything else is subject to change in some way. So yeah, I could certainly see playing less at some point. But what that does for the entire deck and what you do to change everything, Calhoun's a really good card into any steel mirror match, really. It even has its moments against Ruby Sapphire at dealing with Hyrims pretty well. Like helping, kind of justify fighting those, making their Tipo quest not free. But yeah, it is a card that is fine playing on turn 2 going first. It's really good against steel mirror matches going second as a way to catch up or dodge the Cindy Storms of your opponents, and it makes life awkward. Sometimes they don't want to, there's a lot of ways you can deal 1 to 2 damage to make it trade up to then just get additional lore while challenging it, and it definitely comes up. But yeah, I again could see playing less. I didn't mind having 4. Sometimes it comes up uninkable wise. I think in one of my matches I played on camera against Ruby Sapphire, I had the awkward draws of like drawing them back to back after my opening hand mulligan. I'm like, that was the worst 2 draws for me to draw right here. But yeah, I mean, every card has its moment. Yeah, every card has its moment. So,
could you talk us through a couple? You mentioned that you had a list of other cards that you were potentially thinking about fitting in. Could you mention a couple of the more high consideration ones?
Yeah, there was a couple of considerations that look kind of funny in some ways. The new John Silver that makes something not be able to challenge.
Someone was playing that. Was it Brendan? What was playing a version?
I don't know exactly.
Someone I think was playing a version very similar to yours, but I noticed the one off John Silver. It freezes a challenge, right?
Yeah, there's those. You could play a card like Benja. You could play a card like similar effect to Benja. It's the new one from the new set, so 3 cost 2/2 that when it dies or banishes, you banish a location or item or something like that.
Oh, I know.
Benny Bones or something.
Billy Bones. Yeah,
Billy Bones. But yeah, I mean, anything that costs 1, 3, or 5 was something I was looking into. I was also looking at cards like Rapunzel's Tower, honestly, because that functionally costs anywhere between 3 and 5, because you can, you count its 1 cost to move as an actual part because you want to play it and then use it immediately. As in steel mirror matches, it's pretty strong. But it just depends on what role you want to fill and what you expect to play against. I mean, diversifying your threats is always good. I mean, I tried Mufasa because you still have, even though there's 12 misses, I think Mufasa is a card that probably isn't seeing as much play as it could, just because people are thinking that you have to play all characters. I think it's still just a good card to, if you have an 80% chance to hit, it's probably fine. Even if you're flipping over, a 1 or 2, it still can be good. Just as an consistent board presence. But there's a ton of things. Yeah, I mean, I could go on forever. I think I tried the Maximus, the 3/3 that shrunk something by 2 strength for a time, like something that just helped challenges work out against Calhoun mirror matches. You got to shrink a Smee or a Calhoun of theirs and hit with your Calhoun, and yours doesn't die now. So like, there's a lot of things I tried out just to try, but I think ultimately I wanted a more powerful effect. Kita was the high, like the top end of everything. And after playing in the cross continentals against my matches against Frank Karsten and Moyen and Earl Meister, even anything that's trying to make a board presence, and sometimes we get into board stalls. I just need a single turn of playing this card and then tapping everything where they can't then kill everything, and the game usually ends because they don't want to quest into me, so I can't get Rapunzel value. But if I can then turn that around and just give you a huge tempo swing in my favor with Kita, that usually wins the game. So
nice, awesome. Want to talk a little bit about your Swiss run or your run in general, and you mentioned Mufasa a moment ago, which, if my information is correct, was your only loss in Swiss to a Steel Amber Mufasa deck. Can you tell us a little bit about that match? Like, did something particularly go wrong that you think is worth highlighting? Was it just a particularly talented player? I mean, they made top 4 anyway, so in a big field like that, I would assume a good level of skill. But yeah, is there anything you can break down about that one match that you lost in Swiss?
It was an interesting match for the most part. Sometimes the Amber Steel Cinderella mirrors get a little bit tricky depending on what build they're on specifically. I think the main thing that highlighted was that I wasn't sure how many copies of Big Cinderella were in their deck, the Stout-Hearted, and I played into it essentially, and that just won the game by itself. I could have shot. Yeah, I thought there was maybe 1 or 2, and then I think they had inked one in the game or something. I know I'd seen one, but I was either choosing to play around a Rapunzel being drawn or a Big Cinderella, and I thought there's more Rapunzels. So I essentially Dwarven Mind a Smee down instead of a Cinderella.
Okay.
And the Smee had 2 damage on it, so I didn't want them to Rapunzel it. So I think that Judgment Call immediately punished me because they just immediately shifted Cinderella, and I lost because of that. So it was close. I mean, it's most Amber Steel matches are very, very early game dependent. I think I've stressed a lot in some of the things I've preached in some ways that with this deck, especially in board-centric mirror matches, the game is usually won or lost in the first 4 turns of the game, not just because of how the game's played out, but what you've had to do ink-wise or not, and like how you've had to maneuver that whole situation. But that just makes the game even more interesting because of how, I think the decision process for the first 4 to 5 turns of the game is so much more critical than everything else beyond that. Usually, it's just that's how important those first turns are.
And after that,
not just because of the lower game, but yeah,
it gets to a point where it's your match to lose. Like you could throw, and a good enough player will punish you for not following through. And again, I would say that contributes towards the skill level in this game. So no, that's great to hear. So you went 7-1 across the course of Swiss, top seed, which is always great. It was a cut to top 8, wasn't it? I've watched the day 2 VOD. Fantastic. So I believe your top 8 game was in the mirror against another SteelSong. I don't know if it was a pure mirror, if they were a low to the ground version like you, or if they were a more classical version. Do you remember?
Yeah, they were. They had Dwarven Minds, but they had Beasts where I had Kitas. I think they were very similar in that case. They actually, when I talked to on day 1 about the deck list, because they asked me about what they were told me what they were playing, and it was very similar to what I had going on. But I know they had a Sad Beast, as it were, to the Kita slot.
I think that's
which was interesting.
I think that's the list I'm missing then, to be honest, because I've only got 8 of the there's the SteelSong, the Mufasa one, and then top 8, 2 classical versions without the mine. So that may be the missing list, another version of that.
Probably.
But you win that one, you go on to top 4, which is the match that I so wish had been on camera, because unless I've not been able to see it, this was not the...
It will be.
Okay, I'm super looking forward to that then, because this was yourself against another very well-known and respected player in Kendall Burdett, who, no surprise to anyone, was running Ruby Amethyst, and I've always called Ruby Amethyst versus SteelSong. I use a wrestling reference. It's The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you could make any similar metaphor to big famous rivalries to suit your tastes. But I think that's kind of the ultimate matchup since the beginning of time, and to have 2 excellent pilots for those to be on either end of the table. So I'm super glad that you say the VOD will be available, because I'm really looking forward to watching that. So if you don't want any spoilers for that, then timestamp skip this bit. But can you break down a little bit how that match went with Kendall?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I was going first, obviously, in games 1 and 3, which were the games I did win. I wouldn't say that the games were entirely contingent on that fact. They were exacerbated by the play versus draw, but I think game 3 I might have won as well with how it played out going second. But there's so many factors when it comes to that because the mulligan decisions they change between whether you're going first or second.
Mm-hmm.
So in retrospect, if we had essentially ended up with the same 7-card hand to start, I think I might have also won going second. Just how it played out eventually. But yeah, they were close to a point, but then it kind of became untenable in one direction or another. There was a tipping point around turn 7 or 8, I'm sure, where things kind of swung. I don't even think he ever played a be prepared in the match against me. Like that's really what it is. If you rely too much on that, you're going to lose to this deck. If you rely on be prepared too much, you're going to get peated. There's going to be a bunch of Lilos coming back.
And he was just one copy of Big Sisu, I believe, from the list. So
yeah, he likes to keep that there. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting match. I would say go watch it. It definitely shows some of the strengths and weaknesses of both decks. I think we both played reasonably well. He said he made a mistake in the game 2, which he won. But it's always good to reflect on those mistakes. So it might have just been an oversight or something like that, because there was a point where he had a ton of cards in hand and like just didn't ink on like turn 9 or 8 or something like that. And he's like, I really should have, because it cost me like the next 2 turns of like convenient play. And it became very awkward for him, he said. So it's hard to understand from my perspective because he had like 7 cards to my like 2. So, but it was definitely, there's a lot of judgment calls and a lot of play you can learn from watching those games. His playing game 2 definitely won him the game, where I think some other people may have lost for sure. But no, I would definitely go and watch it. It was a fun game.
But then take you on to the finals against Ruby Sapphire. This match I watched it in its entirety. Game 1, turn 1 Daisy, turn 2 Daisy. How often did that
was nice.
But my question is, how often did that legitimately happen over the course of 2 days of Lorcana?
That was the only time.
I thought you were going to say that.
I mean, I was at players only loss in the Swiss rounds. I actually played against them in round 2 as well. And they didn't have the greatest draw in that round. I think the match ended in 14 minutes. Like 2 games in a row, just very quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they had essentially the best draws they could have going second, which was both games 1 and 3, which was Sail into Sail Sisu. So then I have to then take a turn off to answer the Sisu in some way, because if I don't, he can shift it the next turn. Big Sisu. So it was still a match despite the start. It was definitely, convenient for me to do that in game 1, just to kind of get that one closed out. But I mean, even game 2, I think it was close for a bit. And there's a lot of things that I think I did play that game as well as I could have. I don't think I made any mistakes in some of my situations. I think there was like some question of whether or not one of the games, I think I played a Pluto out into a pretty obvious sweeper of some kind, but it was just a hedge against which one they were going to play, where I kind of had to force a Be Prepared and hedge against the Sisu being played, because Sisu was catastrophic, and Be Prepared, I didn't really care about the Pluto because I wasn't going to be able to play it next turn anyway. So it was some things like that, where if you just think about it for a few minutes, you can probably figure that it was right to do so. But people were like, why did you throw that out? They're definitely going to Be Prepared you. I'm like, well, they might Sisu me, and I can't beat that card if I don't play this card here.
One is worse than the
situation.
other. One is worse than
significantly.
The other.
Yeah, significantly. Sisu is a card I care about more so than Be Prepared. I don't really care too much about Be Prepared against this deck.
No.
Just the Lilo is significantly better against Be Prepared than it is Sisu.
And quite often you're just shutting it down with Pete anyway. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, took the championship and are now a back-to-back Charie Collectables Show's champion. I feel like they need to get you a title belt that you can walk in with the next time and say, who's going to take this from me?
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
No, I love it. Again, you're a content creator that I've always, whenever I see you, whether it's for your own content or like conversations, the LCCC, I think you're someone who you're always going to get a straight answer to a question. You're not going to butter it up, and you're always going to say exactly how you feel. But at the same time, you've always been perfectly polite, really respectful to your opponents. And it's even the small things, like I watched some of the day 2 VOD. And it's small things that make a big difference to me. Like, I think it was in your final match. And I think it's Jeremiah had 2 ice blocks, played down the Flavisham before exerting one, and then kind of did I should have exerted, and you just immediately went yeah on this, whatever. And like, again, that is not like the other example I was going to bring up was there was a time you played a Pete and your opponent went to sail, and it was the only time I saw your hand physically, like, because they were about to draw straight away.
Yeah.
And I know that is somewhat also because that's in the rules. It is both players' responsibility to upkeep the game state. But the other one, like allowing them to ice block when you didn't have to in a like big event with a lot of money on the line. I don't know how much that mattered, but nonetheless, it's small things like that that go a long way with me. I like when I did the content creator set champs at the beginning of last set, like there were 3, and this is all recorded. There was like 3 games where I'm reminding my opponent of Diablo triggers, which again I don't have to do, but it's something that like I just see as respectful. And when I see others doing the same, I think it's important to highlight that, like, you know, the positive sportsmanship of it. But again, like I know it's both players' responsibility to upkeep the game state, but I just found it funny because you're such a slow and like methodical player, and then you played the Pete, they went sail, and like, whoa, all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, you meant what you mentioned too. I think in round 3 I played against someone. I reminded them of Diablo triggers because it's just your card's in play. I'm drawing a card and I tap your Diablo, like just to make sure we move on from the game state. But yeah, I think that was like I think it was the second time that there was a play into Pete, and yeah, I for sure was like ready to go because as soon as they like about to put the card into their discard, I'm like it's an action. They can't play it. So I was like, essentially like, don't do that again. Essentially I'm just like, I get it, you're nervous, that's fine, totally fine. I don't think it was them trying to get away with anything. It was just like, I'm gonna lose if I don't do something. Oh crap, I'm thinking, oh yeah, Pete, crap, I forgot about it. So like I was ready to go because I knew that's like where they're positioning the thing. So I was like, nope, don't do that.
Yeah, no.
But then I put the die on top of the deck afterwards. I'm like, don't do that. I'm probably gonna do something like that from now on, like because they acknowledge when I played a Pete in the first or second game or something like that. When I turned it upside down, they're like, yeah, I understand. It's like use. I'm like, okay, as long as you understand. But then that happened, and I'm like, all right, make sure you understand. So it's all good.
Yeah, no, but it's a good, like, again, good on you for like being a good like doing it in a healthy way. But it is an important thing. Please, guys, myself included, remember your Pete triggers or your Pete stop action, should I say?
Yeah.
Remember.
I like to turn it upside down just to say that like this is me announcing it. This is active for this turn. Like just it's facing you, so you know. Like it's just an easy thing to do. And say you've announced it. Yes, I turned it upside down for this turn to make sure it's acknowledged.
Want to be super respectful of your time. Your Patreon is going to be linked down below, as well as your YouTube as well. But is there any sort of plug you can give as to like what Patreon, your Patreon members may expect over the time leading, because obviously you've got North American Championships coming up. Obviously I'm not going to prize you too much about that because, you know, we're all wanting to be as close to the chest as possible, and I'm sure you'll be giving some information to your Patreon members. But any sort of like advertising you'd like to do, if anyone considers becoming a Patreon soon, then what can they expect between now and North American Championships from you in terms of content?
Yeah, I'm going to do a lot of reviewing of this deck in particular. Some of the matches I played, I want to go through and highlight certain decision-making processes, but also kind of a summary of where I expect people to be, the differences between the LCQ and the Continental itself, because I think more people who are subscribed or are going to be trying to go are going to be people who are LCQing just by numbers alone. There's not as many people at the challenge, or the Continentals, but yeah, it is different. Best of 3 is definitely different than best of 2, and while you do have to have a game plan for the second day if you make it in top 16 of the Continentals, it's when you're then playing best of 3. Best of 2 is a significantly different animal than best of 3, which is why I noted like my play draw ratio and my win percentage on each side throughout the tournament. Like I did, essentially day 1 was 7 rounds, and if this was a Continental event, I would have been 4-0-3. I 2-0'd 4 times, and then 2-1'd. I guess we would have split the game, so it would have been a tie. So game 3 happened 3 times, so it would have been 4-0-3, which would have been good enough for day 2, which would be great for Continentals. I'm hoping for that same result. But basically going through a lot of this deck, it is something I'm looking to play. I mean, as of right now, you asked me what I'm submitting tomorrow. It's probably going to be this deck, but like I don't know if anything's going to change over the next 3 weeks. I think we have 2-3 weeks, but
something like
who
that.
knows? Yeah.
Coming up.
That's all I got.
Coming up very soon, and I'm super excited to get to watch it as a viewer. Last thing I need to ask you about outside of Lorcana before I let you go, I've got to draw. It always draws my attention, the beautiful Legend of Zelda art that you've got in the background. I have to spend 60 seconds talking to you about this. Are you a Zelda fan, or do you just like this artwork?
Oh yeah. Since I was like 5.
Top 3 games for you in your favorite games.
So I would probably say Breath of the Wild was an experience I don't think I'll ever get again.
Okay.
It was the kind of open-ended, open world thing that I've played other games that are open world and stuff like that, but that was truly an awe moment for me. That's probably my favorite one just on that alone. Wind Waker is one that got better as time moved on for me. I initially, when I first saw it, when I was like 12 or something, I was like, what is this? This looks awful. But then I over time, I was like, this is just the perfect art style and animation for this type of game. And it was slowly one of my favorite over time too. But it just is like, I think I'll say the remastered version, which has some of the sailing part that took forever to do for no reason, cut out of it, which is a better thing to do.
For the 3DS, I think that was,
Yeah, I think that was better, but that was one of my favorite games too. And I mean, a lot of things are great. Like a lot of games, I've played almost all of them. I mean, I think one of the first one I ever played was A Link to the Past, so that was like has a special place for me.
Yeah.
Just it was a fun. I was 4 or 5 years old playing that game, and my dad was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Beating this game," and he's like, "I don't know how this works." So it was a fun. But I love a ton of them. So I mean, they're all fun.
Yeah, I had to pick your brain. I always see the Zelda post picture, so I had to pick your brain about that. But once again, mate, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Again, shout out to the Patreon. And I cannot wait to see how you perform at the North American Championships. With any luck, I'll get my dream Zach Bivens DeCandio final. That's what I want, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever played, so that'd be fun.
So I've heard. You are my Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. It's all wrestling references today, but nonetheless,
I don't get it.
That's absolutely, you don't have to, DeCandio. Just know that it's cinema, okay? Cinema.
Okay. And
that is it. Again, a huge thank you to DeCandio for coming on. I know their time is very precious to them, so always an honour to get a player of DeCandio's level to agree to come onto the channel and have a chat, and hopefully it was enjoyable to you guys as well. But yeah, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all things Lorcana. Hit that like button to show support, and we'll see you soon.